moving to the wide receivers. There's a couple of older guys who were still pretty awesome last year, Davante Adams and Keenan Allen. I made the reference to Adams just following Rodgers wherever. I can't think of a wide receiver that I wouldn't feel worse about if Adams and Rodgers end up in that spot. But do you think that it looks like Adams still has a lot of juice left, or is it just he still has Aaron Rodgers' attention?
I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah, he had pretty solid numbers with the Jets, 2.3 yards per run with the Jets, which is good. Solid separation score with the Jets, would have ranked in the same vicinity as like Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley over the course of the full season. So that was good to see because his early season underlying metrics with the Raiders were absolutely horrible. And I was wondering if maybe he was just washed, but I think it was maybe just the dysfunction of what was going on there. So there's probably still some tread on his tires. And if he ends up in the right spot, then I don't think it was just Rodgers. I mean, we've seen this guy be historically good. So I think it's totally fair to believe that his age window could extend beyond what we see most of the time at wide receiver.
Do you strongly prefer Adams over Keenan Allen?
I do, yeah.
Okay. That's Chris Godwin is not as old as those guys, but coming off of a second major leg injury in the last 4 years. We saw a couple of years ago, that first year back, really almost the first 3 quarters of the year was really negatively impacted by the injury, it seemed, in terms of actual production. And I just wonder, like, again, Godwin kind of like Ayuk in that nobody's going to debate how awesome Chris Godwin is, but he's 29 years old. We don't know how good he's going to be the first half of this year coming off of that injury. Is he basically in the Ayuk range in terms of dynasty rankings for you?
Comparing those two is breaking my brain because they're like complete opposites. His game is really fantasy friendly, Chris Godwin.
Right.
So like his per route data was elite last year. His production was elite. But I do think so much of that was him benefiting from Leon Cohen's design and him being exactly the player to be plugged into this design. He's really, really good. But like what he was really good at was catching the ball and breaking tackles. Which, can be replicated, but if you do lose a little bit of juice with the injuries and age and stuff like that, then it's like, oh, what do we really have here? Is it Deebo Samuel 2024 season? Like what is this? Over 1/4 of his yards last year came on screens, which was the highest rate in the NFL by a pretty wide margin. If you remove screens, his yard per target rate was not good. It was like the same as Demario Douglas. And I think with Cohen leaving, I am wary of investing in Chris Godwin. I love the guy as a player, but I do worry a little bit about where we're at this point in his career. It's been a while. It's basically since his early career that he's shown us like a consistent ability to win down the field versus man coverage. Right. And so if he's reliant on the offense, like kind of using him in this gimmicky way, we'll see. Tampa Bay's offense could be good and he could just be healthy and be the same guy, or at least 95% of it and still be really good for fantasy. But I'm fine missing out on that, honestly.
Jalen McMillan was a guy that a lot of people were really excited about when they thought Godwin might leave. Mm-hmm. And now that they haven't agreed to anything yet. The Bucs and Godwin just agreed to push back a deadline so they could try to work out a deal. I'm assuming if they do sign a deal, that McMillan's dynasty value is going to take a significant hit. Would you be willing to give up a late second for McMillan? Did you see enough from him last year to do that?
I don't think I love that. No, I think just because this draft is so intriguing. I guess if it's a future second, then sure. I was pretty impressed with what we saw in the second half of McMillan's season last year. I think he really improved as the year went on. He looked kind of lost early on. But I liked him as a prospect. I loved what we saw during the preseason, and he showed a lot of encouraging signs. And he benefited from Godwin being out because the offense shifted in a different direction and passed down the field more often. But he wasn't necessarily like winning in the Godwin role. So I think it's possible that all three of them could coexist if Godwin and Evans start to take a slight step back. And he wouldn't necessarily. It's not like he got plugged into the Godwin role and he started putting up a bunch of catch and run stuff.
No, I think it was more Sterling Shepard in the Godwin role, and he was just getting more targets. A couple of guys left Marquise Brown may not get to free agency because it sounds like the Chiefs want to bring him back, although I'm not sure that does anything for us at all in terms of dynasty value. Yeah. Amari Cooper just had one of the worst seasons a wide receiver could have. Partially, it was partially Deshaun Watson's fault. It was partially that he had a wrist injury fault, but regardless of what the circumstances were, it was absolutely atrocious. Do you have any hope for Marquise Brown or Amari Cooper?
I didn't see much from Hollywood that was exciting, really.
Yeah.
The Chiefs early on seemed like they wanted to get him going in some creative ways, and so if they are intent on bringing him back, that's intriguing. But it would be wait and see for me, because so far it's been a while since we've seen anything from him that is encouraging. Amari Cooper really had a strong 2023, better than people realize, I think, because it was masked by just the dysfunction of the offense that year. And that had me pretty bullish on him and his ability to be good later into his career. And then this past year was terrible, like you alluded to, but he did show up strong in that metric that I mentioned earlier, yards per target on target throws. There just were very few of those. Even when he moved to the Bills, I don't know if it was just bad luck on a small sample size with Josh Allen throwing deep to him, or what it was, just those two not being on the same page because it was a mid-season acquisition. But he didn't get a lot of on-target throws down the field. But when he did, he was productive with them. I think there's a chance. If I were to bet on one of them, it would definitely be Amari.
Okay. And the problem with Amari, of course, is that he's going to be 31 next year.
Yeah.
And so you are betting on a bounce back from an older player. But honestly, he might be somebody that when we get closer to rookie drafts gets cut. Yeah. Like somebody needs to make room to make their I wouldn't cut him for a third round rookie pick, but I mean, in a shallower league, you need to make room for that late second, 23 or 24. You're a true contender. Like that might be a guy that ends up on the waiver wire. And in that case, I'd probably try to pick him up.